Recreation and Parks Commission tonight. Would everyone please stand and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Melissa, we're going to do roll call, please.
Yes, Chairperson Bob Moda.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Lee Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Dave Loobs.
Here.
Commissioner Julie Stolnak. Here. And Commissioner Kelly Watson.
Present.
Excellent, thank you. And we have two presentations tonight, and Melissa, you're gonna take them. Go ahead, thank you.
Sure, thank you so much. And good evening, Rec and Parks Commission and viewers at home. I want to thank all of you for making time for tonight's special meeting, which is going to be focusing on two important aquatics items. The first item is a continuation of the conversation from last month regarding the city's aquatics fees. Tonight's presentation will be by Eric Johnson with Revenue and Cost Specialist, and representatives from the Finance Department and the Community Services Department are here as well to participate in the discussion after Eric's presentation. So Eric, thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure. All right, well, I'm going to share my screen here so you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, everybody able to see that okay? Wonderful. Well, thank you, Melissa. I am Eric Johnson from Revenue and Cost Specialist. Just wanted to walk you through what we did with this cost study for the city's aquatics program and show you the results and talk about how we got to those results. And then towards the end, show you some fee comparisons with some other agencies. There's going to be a lot of numbers in this presentation, so let me just go ahead and go through it, and with the idea that knowing we're going to circle back and key in on any slides you guys have questions about. But if I am going too fast and getting past a slide before you'd like me to, please just jump in and say so. All right, so what have we done? Our goal in this was to identify what are the costs by pool and what are the costs by program or user within each pool. And then we want to break out those costs by the type of cost. So we started out with identifying the cost in the pool budget. So the aquatics budget, the Weisburn budget, that includes the direct salaries and benefits and supplies for the three pools. We then wanted to identify what's the usage at the three pools by different type of user or group. We then allocated the cost based on that usage. So the more lane hours a group or a user used, a program used, the more cost it got allocated. We also added, in addition to these direct costs, we added in maintenance cost, we added in city and department overhead, and we added in facility replacement at the Plunge and at Hilltop, and not at Weisburn because the city does not own that pool. So that gives us the full business cost of the three facilities. So let me kind of walk through what the results were. Again, there'll be a lot of slides with a lot of numbers here, so please jump in if I'm going too quickly. So as I mentioned, we broke out the direct cost by pool, the maintenance cost by pool, the department overhead and city overhead and facility replacement by pool to get to a total of about $3.6 million fully costed out for the three pools put together. When we look at how the pools are being used, at each pool, of course, a little bit different. At Weisburn, a little more than half of the usage is on city programs, with a little less than half of the usage by other users, school district, water polo, private rentals, and swim groups. The Plunge is much more, 85% on the city programs, and Hilltop is even more, 97% on city programs. So of course, we then allocate out those costs that we looked at in the previous slide to the various different programs, and combined together, you see that $3.6 million off to the right there. Aquatics programs are about $2.4 million of that, and then the others making up the difference. we take this number and we break it down by pool, by facility. We see Weisburn with the direct cost of a little over $1 million, maintenance cost of about $250,000, and then the department overhead and city overhead added in for about $800,000. So about $2.1 million for the cost of the pool, with again, a little more than half of that being allocated to the city programs. If we look at the plunge, again, based on its usage, we have about $1.3 million in cost, $575,000 of that on direct cost, $114 on maintenance, $622 on department overhead, city overhead, and facility replacement now at the plunge. With Hilltop, total cost about $180,000, almost all of that on aquatics programs, $68,000 on direct costs, $25,000 on maintenance, and about almost $90,000 on department overhead, city overhead, and facility replacement. So now we have the cost broken out, and now we compare that to the revenues. So if we combine all three facilities together, we have about $1.4 million in total revenues. That's about 81% direct cost recovery, about 67% direct plus maintenance together cost recovery, and overall about 40% cost recovery. But it's much different than when we look at each individual pool, because Weisburn brings in the bulk of that revenue, $1.2 million. And so when we look at the direct cost recovery, it's recovering about 114%. When we add in maintenance, it takes us down to 94%, and direct maintenance and overhead takes us down to about 60%. Now, when we move over to the plunge, of course, more of a community pool versus a competitive pool, the cost recovery rates are much lower. About 26% for direct cost recovery, 22% for including maintenance, and down to 11% for when we add in overhead and facility replacement. And Hilltop is very similar, about 30%, 22%, and again, 11%. And this really is in line with what I see in other pools when I've looked at this in other agencies. When I look at community pools and looking at just that direct cost column, we're typically in the 20 to 30% cost recovery range. When I look at competitive pools, we're more in the 75 to 100% cost recovery range. Now, I've picked out some pools I've looked at in other agencies, and it's hard to compare apples to apples with a lot of these, because some places it's a competitive pool and a community pool. And sometimes there's like a kiddie pool plus a competitive pool. So trying to kind of put that range in, and also looking at just direct cost. There was I know there's been a discussion about having the plunge, keeping the plunge closed, and what would be the cost savings to the city. Because there's many costs that would be ongoing costs, whether it be full-time positions at the pool, or certainly department overhead and city overhead, those costs from a city perspective don't go away. We've included, as far as what would the cost savings be, by removing the part-time cost and the services and supply costs. So that works out to about $484,000 in costs, that true savings to the city if the plunge were closed. Now, when we compare where the city's at compared to some surrounding agencies, some surrounding pools, we compared with Hawthorne, Santa Monica, Manhattan Beach, and Culver City. And we picked just a few of the kind of the more popular programs. So in this case, looking at Lap Swim on the left and Rec Swim on the right. And you can kind of see where each agency's at. And then if I go to the next slide, it's the same thing, basically just represented graphically. So you see El Segundo is the blue bar on the left, and the other four cities after that. And then if we look at lessons, group lessons versus private lessons, again, the same four other cities, although Hawthorne and Culver City don't offer private swim lessons. So when we look at that as a graph, it'll be the 5 cities on the left and the 3 cities on the right. So that is quickly going through what the results are, and a little bit on the fee comparison side. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. I know there's going to be a lot of going back questions about the data and how we got to the data. So let's just kind of throw that back to the commission or to city staff to dive into those questions. And that concludes my presentation.
Melissa, did you want to say anything, or do you want me to see what commission has to say?
Sure. And Joe Lilio, who was part of the conversation last month, is here as well. Finance, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, not at this time, Melissa. Maybe we can solicit some feedback or questions from the commission and appropriately address those questions. Maybe one thing to add is we were going to bring this to City Council October 19th. That has been moved to November 2nd. So we are now bringing this November 2nd. We will solicit feedback from the council and then incorporate that feedback into the public hearing, which will then be brought November 16th to City Council. So November 2nd, soliciting feedback from council. November 16th would be the public hearing and adoption of the new fee schedule.
Okay. I guess let's check with the commission here. So where do we want to start? Lee?
Sure. First, Eric, as you go through everything, I've spent a lot of time on this, on the City of El Segundo Weisburn School District Aquatic Center. I think it would be wise before we bring it to council to change the name of the Weisburn program allocation to the Aquatic Center. I don't think I need to go into all the reasons why, but it's more than just Weisburn. It's also El Segundo's, and we do run it. So I think rather than getting a pissy match like we've done in the past about whose it is, just the Aquatic Center, as we've done with the plunge. We don't call it the Eurosari Swim Stadium. Maybe start with that, and that's just a suggestion. The first question I had is that you go in, and when I look at the overall budget, you've got almost $1 million for the Aquatic Center, I think, in department overhead, city overhead, and facility replacement. I assume facility replacement is what we used to call the capital expenditure fund. Can you kind of outline exactly what's in all three of those? I just found the 806,000 a little bit high, and I'd kind of like to get an idea why it's at 800,000.
Sure. Get to that slide. Sorry. There we go. Nope, that's not it. There we go. The city overhead and department overhead numbers came from the cost allocation plan that we just finished for the city a couple of months ago. And so in that, we identified what is the aquatics and Weisburn's division share of city council, city manager, finance, HR, and so on. And so that worked out to, when we look at it as a percent of salary, that worked out to about 29% of salary. And so that's the number we used. So even though that was based on last year's numbers, we then turned that into a percent to apply to this year's numbers. And so for both for that and for the department overhead is how we arrived at those numbers, calculated a percent of salary and then applied it against the salaries in this year's budget.
Okay, so we're applying percentage of salaries from the city manager, program manager, all the way down.
HR, exactly.
Wait, 29% of each of those employees' salaries?
29% of the salaries budgeted within the Weisburn budget and the aquatics budget. 29% of those gave us our number that determines what the city overhead cost is for each of those areas.
I'm still confused.
So if we have, for instance, we have in Weisburn, we have over $800,000 in salaries budgeted in Weisburn between part-time and full-time salaries.
Those are the people in the city of Hawthorne or in the Weisburn School District who actively work on things related to the pool?
No, it's the city employees. Let me stop calling it Weisburn, called the Aquatic Center. City employees that are budgeted in the Aquatic Center, but the city's budget for the Aquatic Center.
Okay, so these are all salaries of people who are actually working there.
Yes.
Got it.
And 29% of that determines what the city overhead rate is.
Okay.
And in addition, the department overhead rate, so community services director, but also within community services admin, but also within recreation admin, that worked out to about 72% of those same salaries. So when we look at those overheads together, we're close to 100%, right around 100% of salaries is the overhead cost.
Lee, can I jump in since it's on topic? Would you mind, Eric? Then what's comprises the direct costs?
The direct costs are the cost within that budget. So within the Aquatic Center budget and within the aquatics budget, the Aquatic Center, well, there you see those numbers there in the direct cost. The $1.76 million is those two divisions in the city budget for 21-22.
Can you give me a handful of examples of what comprises those direct costs?
Yes. Okay, so if we look at the top part up here, the numbers at the top, there you can see, this is the aquatics budget. And so there you can see here, salaries, full-time, part-time, various benefits, as well as supplies, utilities, and other services that add up for the aquatics to $644,000.
So I'm so sorry, I'm not getting it. I thought that these direct salaries related to the operation were in the city overhead and department overhead.
No, city overhead, department overhead city overhead includes their share of city manager and finance director and accounts payable and HR and those kinds of things are in overhead. The other parts of overhead is department overhead for things like Melissa and Arcia and the administrative people and costs within community services. These costs here are the direct people working at the pools, lifeguards and instructors and coordinators and such at each of the pools.
Can I maybe just add a little bit of context to that, please? So your overhead, so those indirect costs are really, you think of it as the support that the city provides to that. So in other words, cutting AP checks, doing staff reports, the city clerk doing a staff report and the whole agenda for that. City manager spending time and energy on this topic. So it's all the behind the scenes staff that are working on supporting that.
So these are indirects. These are all indirects.
Indirect. Yeah. So the 800,000.
And you use the 29%.
Well, so
for indirects.
No. So the total city staffing is closer to $60 million. So that's staff and benefits. So if you look at citywide general fund, about 60 million in benefits. So the 800,000 really is a small piece. That 29%, Eric, I don't know if you can explain it a little bit better or not, but it's not 29% of total salaries citywide. No.
No, it's.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, are you using 29% of anybody's salary?
So 29% of these salaries right here. So 29% of the full-time salaries and the part-time salaries directly budgeted in aquatics. So, and again, that's just, we calculate a dollar amount that aquatics receives in support. I just turned that into a percentage because that dollar amount was calculated in last year's budget, and I wanted to apply it against this year's budget.
Right, but these right here are the direct costs. These aren't the overhead.
Correct.
Right? You brought this up to show the directs.
Correct.
So on the indirect side, going back to Lee's question, $800,000 for indirect seems like a really high number.
Well, and also included in part of that is facility replacement. So $240,000 of that is for depreciation cost at the plunge, because we put in about a $10 million cost, what it would cost today to build a brand new plunge. We estimated about $10 million. If we amortize that over 50 years, that's $200,000. Same thing with Hilltop, although we had a $2 million cost amortized over 50 years or $40,000. So part of that $800,000 is $240,000 for this depreciation cost on those two facilities.
Right, but I thought the 800 was Wiseburn only. So that doesn't take off from the 800, right?
Can I jump in here for 1 second too? Like, I feel like I appreciate exactly what you're doing in terms of burdening the overhead, but isn't it unfair in a sense that, because if you were to spread city staff and city allocation over all the city departments, the plunge or the pools, because of the fact that they have dedicated staff that are specific to running a pool, couldn't you argue that that's a disproportionate allocation, that they don't use the same amount of overheads as the other departments proportionally that are actually being run, as city departments, as opposed to this, which is already got a lot of dedication, but they're almost getting burdened twice. Like, we're paying for all this direct labor, and then we're burdening them overly with management and overhead that isn't really, it's sort of a disproportionate double counting. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but when we did the cost allocation plan, we really went into the detail on how we allocated each service. We've just turned it into a simple percent here, but that's just so I can come up with a number based on last year's cost. The cost, like I said, for
sure, but it accounts for 600. It accounts for 600 or some odd $1,000. And I guess when we look at this and I say, could I run, the administrative side of a pool, not including all of the staff that are there, for less than $600,000? It seems like that would be a no-brainer, unless we are literally the most inefficient organization ever, which I just think our staff do a better job than that. So I just feel like it's a disproportionate allocation because of the fact that this animal is a little bit different than other city services.
Yeah, can I just add a little bit more content to that? So, but what's included in that is, again, finance. So, we get invoices to pay that are related directly to the pool operations. Cutting the check, that costs money. Cashing the check costs the city money. Processing it. City clerk's office, every time they put an agenda together, and so they look at how many agendas the city clerk put together throughout the year total, and how many of those were related to aquatics or the pools in general, and then they spread that out. So it's the city manager as well. So when you're adding in totality, the 800,000 is actually extremely lean compared to many of the other departments overhead.
Yeah, and when there are certainly costs in here, like general city costs. City manager doesn't do any direct support of the pool. City manager and the city manager's office and city council are involved with policy for the city and setting policy for the city. And those costs are allocated to everyone proportionally also. So it's beyond just the direct running of the pool for things that Joe mentioned, and other things that are policy level things that everyone in the city must bear. And so that's why these numbers probably seem a little higher than you think they would be. But it is also something that 29% is a number that's frankly on the low side. And so it's—
How does it compare to other cities? Do other cities spend this much to operate and allocate this much for their pool?
Absolutely. It's roughly, when we look at things, almost a 1-to-1 between overhead and direct cost. And that is very common for it to be the case, whether it be in a pool or be in other city departments, that there is this level of support behind the scenes that is not just the direct support, but also that policy support. And so these numbers made sense to me based on my experience. And,
okay.
But one thing I don't want to lose sight of is, we pull up this $3.6 million number, but when we get to looking at these other slides, you'll notice that I put the direct costs in red, and I put the maintenance costs in bold, and the other costs are just there. When it comes to running the pool and knowing how you're doing with the pool, I think you should really focus on those direct cost and maintenance costs. We calculated the full cost because it's good to know, especially on the facility replacement side and the depreciation side. But focusing on the direct cost is allows you to set policy based on costs that you can wrap your arms around, but also that department can wrap their arms around. So let's say you come forward with, as part of this, that as a policy, we want to recover 80% of our direct cost. Or let's say we want to recover 100% of our direct cost. That's a goal that the council, that staff could then follow through on and report back to you. Once we started adding in maintenance costs, now we got to talk to Public Works about how much cost they're spending there. And we got to talk to, get the cost allocation plan numbers and run all that. When it really just comes down to, if we look at direct cost and focus our policy on those direct costs, it may be a higher percent cost recovery than if we focused on total cost, but we're still talking about the same animal. These other things get added on because they exist. But from a policy perspective, I would focus on the direct cost.
I hear you, but there's a little more subjectivity in indirects.
Oh, absolutely. I do this for a living. I completely agree with that.
I mean, you could probably justify a lot of different numbers in that indirect column. And I think at least that's what I'm trying to, feels like that's kind of where the discussion is centered around.
Yeah, it certainly is. You're dealing with hard numbers, but you're having to make some assumptions at certain points to develop a final allocation. And so another reason to focus on the direct cost.
Yeah, but these is pretty material. I mean, it's almost half of the cost that we're talking about. So, but let me ask this. Are the direct costs competitive, or are we more or less efficient? And I realize we're going to talk revenue side in a second, but on the cost side, are we more efficient or less efficient or similarly efficient to other pools?
You're actually a little, not, again, kind of looking differently between a competitive pool and a community pool. The competitive pool, you guys are doing a little better than I see in a couple other places, where it's been more like that 75 to 100%, and you guys are at 114% because you're doing well on your rentals and you're doing well on your programs, which is on the unusual side also.
Okay, well, I'm not talking about revenue side though. I'm just talking about cost side. Are we managing our costs better or worse than others?
It's hard for me to say because we're looking at what the costs are, and the other piece of that is what is the service being provided. So we didn't get into whether it's a good service or excellent service or whatever. We just looked at these are what the costs are that you're providing these programs for, because that's that next piece, that when you determine if something's being done efficiently, is how are you using these dollars to provide the best service possible. And that's not something we studied as part of this.
Can I ask a question from the audience?
We're not taking any from the audience right now. It's not a public hearing.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. No problem.
Bob, I had a question.
I think, go ahead.
Can you tell me, with the direct costs and the employees that represents, how many direct employees are we talking about? And does our staffing levels look like they are meeting the demands at the aquatic center? Or are we going to need to add staffing, or do we have too much staffing?
I'll leave that for Melissa or Linnea.
Sure. So I'll begin, Linnea, and then if you want to jump in also, at the aquatic center, we do only have 2 full-time staff members and rely heavily on part-time staff for different positions. So, lifeguards and instructors, senior lifeguards. And unfortunately, right now, I mean, the reality is we have a lot of vacancies and we are actively recruiting. And we're going to talk more about that when in the next piece of the plunge operations, both for Aquatic Center and for the plunge. So we have a good level of staffing if we were fully staffed, but we are only at about 50% staffed overall for the city's aquatics personnel right now. So it has been a really big challenge that does impact service, although the personnel that are there have done an amazing job, as you can see from the performance of both participation and revenues over this past 2021, especially compared to last year with the challenges of the pandemic. So I hope that's answering your question. In terms of ideal staffing, it is something that we would want to look at more closely as a renovation of the plunge would happen, because we would anticipate that usage there would increase also. And so we might need to make some adjustments in staffing levels on the plunge side once it was ready to open fully after a renovation.
So then these numbers would be going up.
Potentially, yes. Although we could also work with HR to kind of rethink the structure of the staffing, meaning perhaps a different balance of full-time and part-time. But likely they would go up to be able to adequately staff all three facilities, fully operational.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Linnea, was there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think you touched on everything.
Okay, thank you.
These numbers for the plunge, we haven't had the plunge open in 2 years. Are these estimates, or where did these numbers for the direct costs for the plunge come from?
I believe they are estimates. We started with the aquatics budget, and then we allocated between the two facilities based on lane hours, so roughly 90-10 split. So about 90% of the cost of the aquatics budget is allocated here, but I believe that budget is based on it being open.
Okay, I'm not hearing. Oh. Lee, did you want to get back in?
Yes, I do, actually. Eric, after you've gone through all the numbers and you've compared it to other facilities, I mean, you put down 75 to 100% of direct costs are what you've seen. I mean, this is the first time I've seen direct costs being used for it, but we're at 114%. So, you know, right now I'm thinking we're doing pretty good. Would that be your general observation, or is there something I'm missing?
It seems like you're doing pretty good at the competitive pools, higher than what I'm used to seeing. At the other two pools, you're more right in the middle of what I'm used to seeing. Community pools, you know, by their nature, lose a lot of money. There's a lot of subsidy there, and that's by their very nature. And so these numbers I'm seeing here for Hilltop and the plunge are right in line with what I see a lot of times in a lot of other similar pools.
Yeah, the plunge, I think, hasn't run in 2 years, and I know that you said that there was a kind of a savings in that. I would hope that some of that savings goes into our next topic, which is the plunge renovation. Just because it has been closed and we have been quote unquote saving that money, and I think that comes up later. But thank you very much. I think it's pretty difficult to compare apples to apples because there's so many different types of pools and different types of goals for different aquatics facilities. So thank you very much. That's about all I got.
Anybody else have any questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Or nobody's saying anything. Melissa? Okay. We were just expecting feedback on here, and there's no vote or anything like that. So what I'm seeing, okay. If there's no other questions, then I think we're gonna move on. Melissa,
That sounds good. Yes.
there we go.
And as always, if any members of the commission or any members of the public have more to say, please reach out to us and we would love to hear it after the meeting as well.
Okay. Second presentation.
Thank you. So I will go ahead and share my screen at this point. There we go. So Public Works Director Elias Sassoon and I were asked to provide a plunge update to the City Council at their upcoming meeting on October 19th. We do want to share the update with you as well tonight and hear if you have any questions or input for us. And as a reminder, the Rec and Parks Commission and the City Council considered Methune's needs assessment and conceptual design for the pool in spring and summer of this year. The proposed design honors the plunge's status as a cherished landmark within the city of El Segundo, both for its historic architectural style and for serving residents as the primary recreation aquatic center since 1940. With the addition of the El Segundo Weisburn Aquatic Center to serve advanced competitive swimming and water polo programming, the plunge is now being envisioned and positioned as a neighborhood community pool, offering a range of programming for beginners and intermediates. I'm going to share a few images now as a reminder of the design, the enhancements, and the vision, and I encourage community members to return to the recording of the June 1st City Council meeting for the full presentation. We do not intend to discuss the needs assessment and the conceptual design in detail tonight. At the June 1st meeting, City Council did direct staff to negotiate a consultant contract for engineering design services for the plunge renovation, and Elias is going to give an update about that effort now. I believe. Are you there, Elias? I can't see.
Yes.
See everybody.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Yes. So the update basically, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I can turn on my camera too. All right. So basically, here's the update. As Melissa indicated, the RFP that initially was sent out was for the conceptual design of the plunge, and then it was indicated as part of the overall presentation to the city council that if the consulting firm did a good job, then the city would continue and request a proposal from the same consulting firm for the actual detailed design and preparation of the construction documents. And that's exactly what we did. Upon the acceptance of the conceptual and the schematic design, we requested a proposal from the consulting firm. We reviewed it. We had a few questions. So we had a follow-up meeting with them when they resubmitted the proposal. But then they decided that they would not be able to undertake the task of providing the environmental and geotechnical report. And we felt that that should be a part of the design. They said that was their policy. So we could not continue the negotiations with them. And we have put together a package, an RFP that is going to hopefully go out next week. The RFP is intended for the architectural and the engineering firms to submit a proposal based on the conceptual and the schematic design that was approved by the city council. Although I included a verbiage there that if the consulting firm that is selected wants to make a revision to the design or wants to modify it, then the city would be willing to hear the consulting firm and would be receptive to the idea. So at this point, I would like to stop, and I'd be more than happy to respond to any question that you may have.
And I wonder, Chair Moda, should we finish with the presentation before opening for questions? Would that
Yes.
be work? Okay. Thank you, Elias.
Sure.
So as Elias has outlined, there is a plan in place to move forward with the next phase of the renovation project, but we also wanted to give you and the community an update about the facility, the financial, and the staffing considerations related to a decision to either operate or not operate the plunge while the design work and the construction is completed. As a reminder, the facility has been in use for 8 decades. The city has been discussing fixing and funding it for at least the last 30 years. It served thousands and thousands of people, and many community members have a strong emotional bond to it. Without renovation, however, it is on its last legs. The plunge was closed for 99 days in 2019, which was the last full year of operations, due to mechanical issues, which equates to about being out of service for about 25% of the time. The heater has been off throughout the pandemic, but there have been major filter leaks during this time. And if the plunge reopens without renovation, complaints about maintenance, airflow, temperatures of the air and water, and more will resume. In addition, the recently completed needs assessment for the facility identified dozens of code compliance issues, such as ADA accessibility for locker rooms and showers, seating areas, pool entry and bathrooms, substandard water filtration and circulation that have frequent leaks, inadequate chemical storage, and more. As you can see, the key renovations that are needed are complete replacement of pool mechanical systems and plumbing, the reconstruction of curbs at both the junior and the senior pools, renovation of locker rooms, an addition of a wheelchair lift for upper level access, and reconfiguration of the entry and the renovation of the existing lobby. You've already heard about the cost of operating the plunge tonight. The good news is that the financial situation of the Aquatic Center has improved this year, with revenue of over $817,000 through the end of September, compared to $372,930 for all of 2020. We expect to make over $1 million in revenue at the Aquatic Center this year. Opening the plunge, on the other hand, prior to having the proper facility, staffing, programming, and fees in place, will make the city's aquatics financial situation much worse. The current condition of the pool and the need to close it again in 2 years for construction limit our ability to scale up to an operations model that will not be hemorrhaging money. And as we started to talk about earlier, obtaining suitable aquatic staffing levels to operate the plunge in addition to the Aquatic Center and Hilltop Pool is also a concern. Our staffing need for El Segundo's 3 pools is 67,218 hours annually, and we currently have enough staff to cover 30,070 of those hours, so less than 50%. Our current staffing shortage at the Aquatic Center impacts service already, leading to canceled programs, including swim lessons, longer customer wait times, and less than optimal lifeguard coverage, in addition to considerable strain on the employees that are in place. Our most recent lifeguard recruitment led to 15 part-time hires, with 13 being high school students with limited availability. Current recruitments underway are needed to help fill multiple vacancies at the Aquatic Center. Some of the challenges relate to our pay rate versus other LA pools, as well as our heavy reliance on part-time versus full-time staff. But there's also a national shortage due to the pandemic that has impacted municipal pools' ability to stay open regular hours across the country. We cannot operate pools without adequate lifeguard coverage. Safety does need to be our most important consideration. For all of these factors, city staff recommends keeping the plunge closed until the renovation is complete. In addition, our recommendation is to consider using the money saved by not operating the plunge during this time for helping to fund the renovation. So let's look at the cost of the renovation in a little more detail. The estimated project cost is $8.5 to $10 million. And thanks to allocations from the City of El Segundo, the El Segundo Unified School District, and Chevron, $2.5 million has been identified for the project so far. A community fundraising plan in partnership with Chevron was disrupted by the pandemic. The collaborative effort may be restarted and grow to include others in the community once there's agreement on our path forward. The current funding gap for the project is $6 to $7.5 million. And again, The recommendation would be to allocate direct cost savings from not operating the plunge to help fund the renovation. So City Council could allocate those cost savings from not operating the plunge this fiscal year at the upcoming mid-year budget review. And if the same decision was made for the second year of work, as well as that first year of construction, an additional 1.5 million would be available in funding, which equates to 4 million instead of 2.5 million available for the project. And that would leave the need to raise an additional 4.5 to 6 million for the project, rather than that 6 to 7.5 million. There are several options to acquire additional funding for the project, including a revenue measure, applying and/or increasing fees, community fundraising, and other strategies. There will be additional community discussions to come related to funding, but tonight's update is primarily to outline the reasons that staff strongly recommends not opening the plunge until the renovation is complete. As mentioned previously, the City of El Segundo has been trying to fix and fund the plunge for at least 30 years. We believe that we are on a realistic and a measured path that could help move us closer toward reaching that goal. That does conclude our presentation, and Elias, Arcia, Lene, and I are all available to answer questions and to receive your input. No vote is needed on this item. It is only informational this evening. Thank you. I'm gonna stop my screen so we can see each other.
Melissa, thank you very much. That was very informative. Anyone have questions for Melissa or anyone? I'm looking for hands, or I see Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, so I want to back up a little bit because we had a quick meeting last month where we talked about the problem with Methuen and why we need to go back to RFP. And I would like to revisit that because I am highly concerned that we moved too quickly to dismiss a vendor that was selected with a great deal of selectivity and has done a fabulous job for us. And the reason cited at the time was that they wouldn't do this environmental piece, but it has come to my understanding that there are many contracts with the city that the environmental piece, we have somebody that can handle the environmental piece. And it appears that this is basically an excuse to get rid of this vendor for some reason. And I don't understand it. I would characterize them as having done a really good job. And I feel like we need to go back to the table because the delays and the project budget that are now being thrown around don't need to be there if we were to be able to move forward with this vendor. So I feel like we need to roll up our sleeves and bring a bunch of people to the table to have conversation and understand better how we can make something work rather than dismiss them so easily when that's going to now add a whole bunch of time and cost to the project.
If I could chime in with that, both Kelly and I were on what was the committee. And most things in committee are done in committee or at least a part of it. I think you saw in the last meeting, a lot of things happened that we were informed about, but we're never in a meeting, never got a seat. The one thing I do know is that when you present this about the plunge, you've basically taken what we had done for the last 2 years in an RFP, saying you're going back out for an RFP, and your goal is to make the end of the cycle reach 2 years further down the road, and you're going to increase the cost from what we were at $7 to $8 million to go to $8 to $10 million. I can't see a single reason other than the fact that an environmental report and a geotechnical survey, weren't part of the included RFP, which it wasn't part of our RFP. It's a detail because I know that we do currently have a bunch of projects going on in the city that have outside vendors doing them for the city. So along with Kelly, I'm very concerned. And when she states, I think we need to sit down with the vendor, with all concerned parties, including the committee and the council, all that are concerned, and see if we can't work out something so it doesn't take 2 years longer and $2 million more dollars. I mean, I was a part of the aquatic center raising money. It's a lot harder to raise an extra $2 million. It really is. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it is much harder. So I would really like to see we sit down, and we've got $2.5 million allotted for it already, and we haven't even started reaching out to see what we can get in other donors and other fundraising, things. I know that the city started the fundraising, and I don't think they got very far with it, but it's in their hands now. But I think we should at least ask to the major donors and see where they're at. So my thought would be to get everyone together and sit down and try to work it out before we go back to bid, take another 2 years, and spend, $8 to $10 million instead of $7 to $8 million.
And I just want to clarify about the budget, and then I'll ask Elias to speak about the negotiations. In the probable cost document that Bethune gave us as part of the conceptual design, their budget ranged from $8.5 to $9.5 million based on contingency. So that's where that range is coming from. It ranged from from 3.9 to 8.4 based on the different levels of enhancements, but then there was contingency, based on what year the project actually was constructed. So I just wanted to clarify that. We don't anticipate that it's actually going to be more expensive than identified at this point. But I did want Elias to come in and talk about also, I think, the timeline, because the timeline hasn't shifted another 2 years either, and then maybe a little bit more about the negotiations.
Right. So I'd be glad to respond. There is no hidden agenda here. This is not an excuse, frankly. The cost that the city already has paid MITHAM is not waste. We have received a conceptual design, which we are going to utilize for the next step. We haven't even found a consulting firm. I don't believe that we have wasted any money at all. So with respect to the fact that your numbers, if you would, that you just talked about, I think Melissa responded to that. I'm using the same numbers that were provided to us with all the components that we requested, and right now the estimate is about $8.5 million. That is still the case. When we negotiate an engineering or architectural fee, we are going to get credit for the conceptual that was already done. With respect to the time, yes, I do agree. It's going to take a few more months to be able to negotiate another fee proposal with another consulting firm. But there is no hidden agenda. There is no excuse for a project of this magnitude, for a project of about $8.5 to $9 million. It is very odd for having a consulting firm to do the design and then defer the environmental and geotechnical to another. It's typically not done that way. When you mentioned that for other projects, if a project is small, the scale is very small and it's controllable or it is manageable, yeah, this could be done. But we're talking about a $9 million project, and we want all the aspect of what it takes to get the design done to be done by one entity, because I've been involved in projects where were done by different consulting firms, and it just not. I would not recommend that whatsoever. So there is, again, I want to reemphasize, there is no hidden agenda. Staff, I personally took both of these proposals home. I reviewed them with passion. I got back with them. I tried to work it out, but it just simply got to a point where, frankly, they withdrew their proposal, and they're the ones who really decided not to do it because of the reason they told me was the policy of their consulting firm. They would not just get involved in this environmental business. It has to do with liability, and frankly, beyond and above that, they did not go any further, and I really didn't ask too many questions. So decision was made by them, so in summary, we are not losing any money. It may take us a few more months, but frankly, at this time, we really exhausted all our efforts to try to work it out with them. It's just their policy that they would not be able to accommodate us.
Elias,
Yes.
how much have we spent on Methuen at this point?
I don't have the exact figure, but I believe the conceptual design that was really managed in.
I mean, we had an RFP set for a dollar amount. I'm sure you know that a dollar amount for that RFP, correct?
Well, are you talking about how much we have spent so far with the consulting firm?
How much do we owe Methuen for everything that they've done? And how much, I mean, we have an RFP, and the RFP, they abided by it, that we/you introduced a new concept to it, which was not part of the original RFP, which is the environmental part and the geotechnical. These are the same people that did the Hollywood Bowl. That is a large project. This is a company that handles large projects. This is one way to do it, is to have it all inclusive. And I can understand why. The only thing I'm asking, and because I haven't seen it, and because I've been a part, or what I thought it was a part of a committee, I'd like to sit down and see exactly what is going on and make it transparent. I can hear all day from you, but until we sit down with all the parties, council members, staff, the committee, which would be nice, and Methuen, and then we could decide whether we're going to make this work or not, rather than go and try to rush another RFP through, which it sounds like you're already trying to get into. And then we're still looking at 2025. And you're including that they can change the conceptual design. So I'd like to at least pull to an end with Methuen in a general meeting within the next month.
I would like to echo what Leah's saying. These guys have done a ton of big projects, and they're saying that the environmental piece is not normally part of the project, and that this is an unusual request, and that there's a lot of good reasons why their insurance company won't let them, become a master on that. This firm renovates old buildings. The other bids that we saw, and I don't know what you're going to get that's new, because we already have all of the bids from the other companies. Nobody else was focused on renovating old buildings and had the experience that this particular group did. So while we're sacrificing, the time it takes, it can't be millions of dollars, but the time it takes to manage two vendors on this, what we're giving up is the folks that know how to renovate a 1930s building. And I don't see why we would give up that kind of quality, open ourselves up. They were not by any means the most expensive bid. Why we would open ourselves back up to that when we could spend a little extra time and work ourselves through this issue with everybody at the table. And I don't see, why not bring more leverage to bear if that was the issue on the situation at all? And what could it hurt to at least give one more crack at this before we extend the time frame and potentially spend more money?
Well, again, I really don't know what else I could say. They were the one who really didn't want to go through with this. So I hear you loud and clear. What I can do is I can share the thoughts of the members of the commission with the upper management, and ultimately it would be up to the city manager's office and maybe city council for the final decision. But there is nothing here hidden. There is no hidden agenda. I'm just telling you the way it is.
I would appreciate when you actually talk to the council and to the manager that you voice our opinions as strongly as we voice them.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I want to go on record and indicate that when I had my conversation with the vendor, I had the same questions and same concerns. The environmental, it was very odd for me. I never had in my over 3 decades of experience, I never been in a situation like this. And, you know, frankly, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but as part of a committee member on a project that I've been working on for over a decade, it would have been nice to be a part of that meeting.
Okay, I understand.
The thing that I'm don't fully understand is why the city doesn't want to use a different firm to do the geotechnical and environmental stuff. When the projects that I've been involved in, we always use a separate firm for geotech. So that's the piece out of this whole thing that I was most confused about, why the city is even asking them that they have to be the one to do it.
Yeah, the simple reason is, as I said, a project of that significant, it's always you want only one entity, and I don't see why that person who's gonna do the environmental or geotech, why wouldn't that person be able to serve the Mitham, you know, as a sub? I just
But
yeah,
that's the piece. Eliza, I think that's the piece that we're all pushing back on. That we kind of disagree with. That it has to be the one firm that does everything. I don't know if we agree with. At least I don't.
Yeah. Well, again, for big projects, the reason is because of the coordination. Because what you know, and we really don't know what is all gonna be involved in the environmental. I don't know to what extent there's going to be contaminants, and I have really no idea unless the environmental part is done. So you know, it's a lot cleaner, easier. It'll go without the less glitch if everybody, including the environmental and geotechnical and civil engineering and all that aspect, work for one entity. I mean, they have a sub who's doing the civil engineering. They have a sub that does plumbing, the electrical, mechanical, wiring, everything else. And, you know, environmental and geotechnical could easily be part of that. I mean, I really find this odd. And I also talk to my colleagues. I also talk to other people in the area that I work with, and they also thought that this really it doesn't seem it's odd. I mean, I'm gonna leave it at that.
I did my homework, Elias, because when you said that last time, I was like, well, that seems reasonable. And so I happen to have a client that's an architecture firm. I checked in with them. They said that was not the case, that it's actually really abnormal, that the city wouldn't have their own environmental, you know, group that goes, that certifies the buildings and everything else. And that whatever report, environmental report that comes out of that process is what they use. So it actually seems like it's the other way around. I mean, you're the only person who's sort of been saying, no, it's got to be a single vendor. And the fact that I know that there are other folks working for the city right now that have not had to do that. So it seems like an interestingly high hurdle. That's all.
Yeah. I didn't say it has to be. I'm just saying that my preference is for a project of this significant that everything be done by the same firm, because we're talking about a $9 million project. I didn't say it can be done in other way. I'm just telling you my preference is to have one firm to be in control of all aspects of the project.
So, Elias, I was part of the Aquatic Center. The Aquatic Center had, I believe, an outside environmental report company. And while they were digging, they found a pipe. Unknown pipe, wasn't on any of the drawings. Not surprising given the fact that aerospace was back there back in the 50s and 60s. They found asbestos. Well, the contractor or the architect isn't going to sit there and go, well, that's asbestos. They have to have somebody come in. That's just part of it. And it was an outside on a $12 million project that the city did a couple years ago. I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah.
Now, what does it hurt to bring everybody back to the table? I just feel like that seems like the easiest and, you know, most efficient way through. And then if that didn't work, then wouldn't you go to the second bidder? And since we've already done a bid process so that we didn't have to slow down, I mean, I just don't know why we're going back to RFP. It doesn't make sense. Let's bring everyone together. Let's try to push through the problem. It's just a hurdle.
Well, as I said, be glad to share your thoughts with upper management, and I'd be more than happy to convey your message and let them know, and we'll go from there.
I believe that's all we can ask is that you do that.
Sure.
Melissa, anything else on this presentation?
I would just ask if there's any other input about the operational piece of the plunge, potentially using the savings of not operating to help fund the renovation.
Makes
Go
sense
ahead,
to me,
Lee.
Melissa. Makes sense to me.
And-
Just not a
and-
problem.
I'm sorry, Lee?
Well, I'm just on the same boat. I mean, as much as I'd love to see that plunge open, I mean, I know that we're short on staff. I know the fact that as soon as we open it, that number 4 filter is going to break again. We're going to have to tell everyone it's closed after spending a bunch of money to get back up again.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
financially, as much as everyone wants to see that thing up and going, I want to see it up and going, but I want to see it done right. And that's why I like Minton, because they're one of the better companies. And, I've been through all 9 of them. I've seen the RFPs. But to go back to the actual plunge, it doesn't make sense to try to get it up and running, just knowing that it's going to be down 25% to 35% of the time, because that was when it was last opened. That was 2 years ago. That pool has not gotten any better in the last 2 years. The staffing and everything else is just going to be money that I don't think is wisely spent. So
Yeah,
that's
I
all
think
I
my
got.
only concern is if we go 2 years without programming, is there then going to be a group that comes back and says, well, why are we doing the plunge at all? We've managed to survive without the programming and we've saved all this money. So isn't this exciting? So my one concern representing the citizens who would be using that pool, the users of the pool, is that, this should not indicate by any stretch of the imagination that there isn't user need for this pool, because there very much is.
I agree.
I'll answer.
That,
I mean, I'll answer to that as far as the programming. The programming is currently being held at the Aquatic Center. And a lot of that we could pull back into the plunge. I think Linnea will agree with it, is that a lot of the Learn to Swim stuff then comes back to the plunge, opens up that, $15 an hour user groups going in and using it and opening it up to them. I know that she had to actually close some user groups out of the time in the smaller pool so she could run her, Learn to Swim lessons and all that. So yeah, there's definitely a need for the pool, but not until the pool's ready to have it. And then we can pull them back. And that pool, the plunge, is a key part of the community becoming a better aquatics town. So.
Okay. I think you've got the response that you were looking for, Melissa, that almost all of us agree. I didn't. So.
Yeah, I just want that plunge to open sometime,
Exactly.
I mean,
but
we gotta
open
save,
correctly.
we gotta save the plunge, and there's a lot of fundraising to be done. It's a lot of money to raise, and it seems like we've been working on this as a city forever, and it just needs to come to an end and open once again as the plunge. But we've been talking as a city about the plunge for years, and we need to make it happen.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And that would be it for the presentations. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Thank you. We'll move on with our agenda. And we're moving to public communications related to commission business only. That is within the subject matter under the jurisdiction of the commission. Do you know of any, Melissa, because I don't see Monse here.
I'm here.
There
Monse
she
has
is.
joined us. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Did you have any written communication?
I did not.
Okay.
Is the gentleman still on here who wanted to speak earlier? Maybe now would be a good time for him. He's not on here anymore.
I don't see him.
Oh, okay, bummer.
That was Don. I don't see him. So with that, we'll close public communications. consent calendar, approval of the minutes of the Recreation and Parks Commission meeting of September 15th, 2021. Anyone?
Lee Davis, I move that we approve them.
I'll second it. Monse, you want to take a voice vote?
Commissioner Watson,
I'm sorry, I apologize. Was that in the packet that was mailed? Because it's not on the email for the special meeting.
It's part of the agenda.
Ah, okay, I apologize. Let me read it.
no,
Okay.
Yes, it looks to be in order. Approved.
Commissioner Stolnak,
I was not president at that meeting, so I should probably not vote on those minutes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lutz,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Davis,
Aye.
and Chairperson Mora.
Yes. Approved. Thank you. That was 4-0, I guess. Unfinished business. There's none. New business. This is, Melissa, I'm going to need help on this, but resolution to conduct public meetings via teleconferencing pursuant to Assembly Bill number 361. And there is commission action required. The recommendation is to adopt a resolution allowing public meetings to continue to be conducted via teleconferencing pursuant to Assembly Bill number 361. There is a supporting document that was part of that packet. Melissa.
Sure, and just a brief overview. As mentioned in the staff report, the item is needed due to Assembly Bill 361 that requires legislative bodies to review the circumstances of the state emergency resulting from the pandemic every 30 days and determine either one, that the state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of the members to meet safely in person, or two, to state that state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. So on October 5th, the El Segundo City Council did adopt a similar resolution and determined that the city's other legislative bodies may not meet exclusively in person, except as determined by the city manager or until the city council provides further direction. So our recommendation is that you approve the resolution tonight, and then you will see this item to continue to appear on your consent calendar beginning in the November meeting until the city council takes other action. So it's a little confusing, but basically it gives you the right to continue to meet virtually during this state of emergency, as long as you continue to find that is needed.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. So this should be a fairly quick thing here. I move that we do approve that resolution number. Well, if there's no number, but that resolution. Is there a second?
I second.
Lee Davis, I'll second that.
Can we have a voice vote, please?
Can I ask you, can we discuss real fast before we vote, Bob?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious. I missed the council meeting. I know this is more convenient. It's more convenient for me, but what is the rationale? I'm ready to start life again. Why is there a lot of momentum to meet in person or to meet online still? Because I feel like it's time to get back, no?
So the recommendation is still not to do the in-person meetings, in part because there are requirements that you have to be masked. And so all of you would have to be masked, and then all of the public would have to be masked, and all of the presenters would have to be masked. So it's still not an ideal situation. You know, if it was the will of the Rec and Parks Commission to move in that direction with those parameters in place, the city manager would have the authority to grant that. But the recommendation right now is to only do that if you know there was a real need to have that meeting in person. The example that the attorney gave was some of the items that the Planning Commission is going to going to consider in the next couple of months might require an in-person meeting with those precautions in place. But one other option would be to do the resolution now, and then again in 30 days, you could actually talk about it and see if you still meet those findings that are within that resolution, and either pass it at that point or not.
Okay,
I mean, we kind of all go to work this way, right?
pretty much. But there is a motion. There was a second. We all know what we want to do, but it doesn't look like the city is going to approve that right now. So there is, Monsik, would you continue with the voice vote, please?
Yes, Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stolnak,
Yes.
Commissioner Lubes,
No.
Vice Chairperson Davis,
Yes.
and Chairperson Moda.
Yes. That's 4-1. Dave, I do agree with you, but I know why. Okay, thank you. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Watson, Kelly.
Yes. I just wanted to reiterate how, dedicated Lee and I have been to the Plunge project, and how we'd like to continue making sure that the Plunge renovation goes through. And we really just feel super strongly in the vendor that we supported, and that we, that we chose from a big group. And I just love to see us, get past our differences and figure out how to move forward. So again, just strenuously want to be on the record as somebody who's trying to make this happen. I don't think slowing down for anything is going to serve us at this point. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Stolnak, Julie.
I don't have anything this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lubes, Dave.
Yeah, I just want a little clarification from Melissa, and maybe it has to go back to Elias on with when things are going to council. Did one of you say that there is going to be a recommendation with regard to fees that goes to council in November? With a change of fee schedule?
Sure. So let me just try to lay out all the items going to council. So on Tuesday, on the 19th, there will be the plunge update. Then on November 2nd, there will be the first part of the presentation about the aquatics fee study. So similar to what Eric presented to you now in terms of cost and cost recovery. And part of that discussion will likely involve direction of council about, what target they would like to see. And then on the 16th, there will be a public hearing related to any possible adjustments in fees. So that would be on November 16th. And then also at that meeting will be the Rec and Park Needs Assessment presentation. So a lot going on in the next few weeks.
So the public meeting on November 16th isn't for the public to respond to fees that have been recommended. It's prior to the council really digging in and making recommendations with regard to maybe raising fees. Is that accurate?
There could potentially be recommendations at that meeting for council consideration. Yes. And part of that is looking at where we fit in within those lessons and within the admissions for rec swim and lap swim, but also what we still need to do a little bit more development on and get that the data is where we fit in terms of rentals and permits. So all of that will be discussed in those two meetings with council.
And I'm not saying I necessarily want to do what I'm about to say, but I'm just curious, is council wanting this commission, the fees to go through this commission first to be discussed before it goes to council, or will that go straight to council?
The fees will go straight to council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that was all. I don't have any report. I just had those questions. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay. Dave, thank you. Vice Chairperson Davis. Lee.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff, Aricia staff, Linnea. When we look at the fee study, the average is 75 to 100% cost recovery for set cost or direct cost. You're at 114%. I know that you've had a lot of people voice their discontent and try to do some very interesting things in and around that, but thank you very much. It's duly noted, at least from me, and I hope council sees that as well. I think the ultimate goal is to get 100% cost recovery. I'm not so sure it's possible given some of the indirect costs that we went over, but I think that's definitely it. And to reiterate, you know, not only what Julie said about getting the plunge done and getting it done soon so that people don't actually forget about it, we're on the right road. And it's just a matter of taking a deep breath, putting people at a table and, you know, more than one person at the table to try to come up with a solution. So I hope that does resonate. And, you know, as far as continuing to do meetings via Zoom, it's not my favorite. I don't like it. I didn't like saying yes, but I understand for now that's what council wants. Once the rules let up, we can go on beyond that. So thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lee. The only thing that I have is, I'm not sure where, I'm pretty sure where Dave was going with wanting to know about the fees and what are they going to go straight to council? I would like to see them come through commission, or at least somebody on commission having some voice in the fees increases. So that's just my opinion. And with that, we'll adjourn to our regular meeting next Wednesday, the 20th, October 20th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.